Good afternoon and welcome to Ziggy's World. This afternoon I'll be speaking with Dr. Pam Spurr, and good afternoon, Pam. How are you?
I'm so well. Thank you for having me. It's great to meet you after interacting on X, formerly known as Twitter.
Yes, yes. So we'll start the show off with you've written a book, a children's book. Do you want
That's
to
right.
tell us all about it?
Yeah, and first I'll show you the cover. It's called Eva the Bear and the Magic Snowflake. And it's all about Eva the Bear, who is a rambunctious little character. And she gets in a big spot of bother out, going out into a big snowstorm when she really shouldn't have. And with a little bit of magic and her own courage, she manages to get home to safety. And I really want Mark to write a book that had kind of that message of, children do face challenges in their lives. And, if they face a challenge, that they can dig deep and they do have resilience. So they can overcome that challenge. And that's the starting point for this book. But of course, the first time I started, writing stories for children was the birth of my first granddaughter, just over 7 years ago. And I would look at those little infant books with her, that just have pictures, and little storylines would come into my head. And so I started writing them down. And then when my second granddaughter arrived, who is Eva, and we nickname her the Bear because she's got such gusto. When she arrived nearly 4.5 years ago, then I started writing stories for her. And then my third granddaughter arrived, and I've written stories for her. So that's where the process sort of started and is, ongoing from there.
Great. So you've written books before, haven't you? You've got a number of books out.
That's right. I've written 15 self-help books for adults over the years. Everything from dream interpretation to dating to sex and relationships, happiness and emotional eating. And that was actually a problem because I started looking for a publisher about 5 years ago for one of my first children's stories. And Mark, they kept saying, no, you're known for adult self-help. We can't risk it. Publishing is so expensive. We can't risk taking a punt on you with a children's story. So, that was really disappointing. But Mark, I felt I had to keep going, Sent out, I think this was the 14th publisher who finally said, yes, we'll do one of your stories.
Well, perseverance keeps.
Yeah.
Oh, if you keep going, eventually you'll get just rewards.
You're absolutely right, Mark. We have to keep going. And it's not just in something like I'm trying to, get my children's stories out there. It's all of life, isn't it? It's about, you have to keep going no matter what. If you're working for a promotion, you have to keep doing it. You're working to, I don't know, on some great hobby of yours, it takes determination to really progress with it. So it's a kind of message for everyone. Just keep going and maybe, your dream will pay off as mine has with the children's story.
I do know it's on Amazon. So where else can you get this book?
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Yes, you can get it on Amazon, Eva the Bear and the Magic Snowflake. Also, my publisher, Austin Macaulay, it's on their website. And I know it's in 5 Waterstones, but I think those are all down in England. So I don't know, if there's any success. Hopefully it will spread to other bookshops too. That's what I'm hoping. Fingers crossed.
Well, I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will be a raving success.
Oh, thank you, Mark.
No problem. But after this break, we're going to go on to the main topic. So we'll be back in 2 seconds. Welcome back, and to today's topic, we're going to be talking about the gender wars that's developing the whole of the country. Well, the whole of the world, to be honest with you, isn't it? It's not just Scotland. It's not just the UK. It's happening all over Europe, all over the world. Now, the first part, I want to discuss the online abuse that women receive. like yourself, J.K. Rowling, Sharon Davis, just to name three. What's your experience over the abuse that you've received and what you've seen from others, especially J.K.?
Yeah, I'm glad you've asked that because J.K. Rowling gets probably more abuse, I'd imagine, than any woman in the world and maybe any person in the world. It's really quite shocking. And to me, it just exposes that underbelly of human nature, that dark side, where people behind their keyboards can say what they want. And she's had the worst murder, rape threats, those sorts of things. And funny enough, when I kind of got into this and talking about gender issues, was I was listening to a radio show about 4.5 years ago, and the presenter started talking about the abuse that J.K. Rowling was getting online. And he made a really good point. I felt that, no matter if you agree with her or not, you should not abuse someone. You can still politely put your point of view. So I went innocently on Twitter, as it was then, X now, and I put out a post saying, I've just been listening to so-and-so, and I thought he made a really good point about J.K. Rowling. And whether you agree with her view or not, you should not give her all that vitriol. And oh my gosh, Mark, okay, I was trolled so badly just for putting what I thought was quite a neutral thing out on Twitter at the time. And I was so horrified. I was blocking all these people. And I thought, I'm not going to talk about that again. Oh, no, I'm not going there. Prior to that, Mark, like any woman on the old Twitter, now X, I would get, odd random guys being sleazy, the odd troll, but nothing like that one post attracted. Then I realized at that point, my second granddaughter had just been born. And then I knew there was going to be a third on the way. And I thought, no, I cannot just ignore this. This impacts every little girl in this country and across the world, and women, our rights, and also the LGB. Because basically gender ideology wants to wipe out little gay and lesbian children and trans away the gay, as we say. So, Mark, I had to steel myself and started posting about these things. And oh, wow. As you said, the vitriol.
Yeah.
And it keeps coming. And any woman, even women who aren't putting their actual picture out there and their actual name, people with anonymous accounts, they still get trolled. If you stand up for women and children and the LGB, you are going to get trolled. There's just no question.
It's just a way of trying to shut you up, basically. It's a way of trying to discredit you, because the names that JK and yourself and that get called, you're far right, or you want to get rid of the trans ideology. You just and all the names. It's just a way of trying to discredit you and trying to cancel you and trying to get shut you up, basically, isn't it?
You are hit the nail on the head. It is to try and stop you. Absolutely. That's what their goal is. They do not want to hear anyone else's point of views. They want to silence them. And people are waking up to this fact, even people who haven't been involved in this culture war. And actually, I don't like to think of it as culture war. I think it's a real issue about the rights, as I said, women, children, and the LGB. And so you're absolutely right. And they will use every disgusting swear word, at you as a woman. And sometimes before I block them, I say, would you say that in front of your mother? Because I often think these mainly young men, very incel type young men, who are probably attached to their computers and, for all I know, live in their mother's basement. I mean, they act like that. Maybe it will make them think. But I usually then block, because they usually come back with something just as foul. But also, Mark, it's the being called, as you said, you're far right. I am not far right at all. I've never voted conservative in my life. Let me get that out there. And they call you fascist, they call you bigot, and they call you Nazi. And I think that totally demeans and devalues what actually happened with the Nazis in World War II. So someone comes on my timeline with saying Nazi to me, that is instant block. I mean, literally.
I actually find that when I get called that, you're a Nazi, or you're far right, or you're Nazi, I take personal offence to that, because my relatives, my granddad died in the Second World War fighting the Nazis.
Yeah.
My great uncle died at the Battle of the Somme in the First World War.
Yeah.
So I've got a history in my family of people fighting against
Fascist.
Nazi ideas. So
Yeah.
I take quite, and I think it is meant, and it's meant as a personal. It's trying and rattle you and to get you to. But do you also find, which the part I find really hard, is the number of people's careers that have been ruined because of this. Because uh, JK is big enough, and she shouldn't have to go through any of this.
Yeah.
But she's very, very successful. She's a
Yeah.
very successful person. But even J.K. Rowling, even her career has been hampered or damaged because of this, and I find
Absolutely.
that absolutely appalling in my view. What's
When you
your
take someone like Maya Forstater, who had to go to court, and thankfully they got the ruling. The Forstater ruling was that you cannot compel someone to say that a man is a woman, and that gender critical views can be protected by law. Then you think of Doc Stock, Kathleen Stock, who left Brighton, you know, um, Sussex University because of the horrific time. She was drummed out. And people have really suffered. In one sense, I've been lucky. I don't know if you call it lucky. I've lost about 10 what I call acquaintances, not good friends. No good friends, even if they disagree with me, have left my side. But I've had a number of acquaintances, mainly from the world of showbiz, but people I've had drinks with, lunch with, dinner with, see at parties, who have just nothing to do with me now because they think I'm such a horrific bigot and fascist. I've also lost some work, thankfully, not the core of my work, so I can keep going. But I do know that I lost one contract because of this. It's nothing I can prove legally, probably, so I'm not going that route with it. And as I say, I'm lucky that it was kind of the icing on the basic cake of my employment. So I can live with the cake. But, I know what it's like with people losing work who can't sustain it. They lose their entire job over the
yeah,
last
yeah.
5, 6, 7
Well, we've
years.
seen, like you mentioned, celebrities. I think a lot are actually scared now to come out and say anything, to
Oh, you're right.
because of the fear of losing jobs within that industry. Because that industry, if you look at JK with the Harry Potter films, she made them kids that are in that the Harry Potter. She made their careers, and by all accounts, they don't want anything to do with JK anymore. They won't mention her. They don't. She doesn't get invited to any of the
I
um,
know.
programs they have about the Harry Potter and that. And I find it quite sad that as a society we've gone down that route,
Yeah, the cancel route.
cancel
Exactly.
people because of their view. Well, not just views, but it's just biological facts, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's quite incredible that now we are trying to shut people down because they want to protect women's rights, women's rights to
And children's rights to not have,
especially, yes, especially children. Because now you mentioned that, we can discuss that about the children. I find it quite disturbing what we're seeing in schools at the moment. What is your opinion on that? On what's going on in
well,
schools and
it's
what?
going to be, it's going to be a massive job to get gender ideology out of school. The 2019, Relationship, Sex, and Health Education Act enshrined that gender identity should be taught in schools. So that bit of that 2019 Act has to be somehow, pulled out of the Act, because until then, teachers are told you need to teach about gender identity. And as I always say, you might as well be teaching children that Greek mythology is fact and that they can be a centaur if they want to, and they can be any of the, Greek the mythology characters, because that's as rooted in fact as gender ideology. And Mark, you simply need to look at the fact, and I know of three systems of gender ideology. There's the one that preaches there's 58 genders, and the Irish government took that on. And an Irish senator last summer, who I think had voted to accept it, said, "Oh my goodness, I didn't know what I was voting for. Now I have to learn 58 different genders, and people can come tell me they're one of these 58 genders." Then if you go online, there's a medical website, and they tout 72 genders. And of course, there was the BBC film that made a lot of people upset about 6 or 7 years ago that said there were 110. Well, crikey, Mark, you and I, why don't we make up an ideology with 1,000 genders and give children all sorts of labels they can choose? Yeah. Which, of course, we don't want to do. We do not want children to label themselves. They are a boy or they are a girl, and they can have a boy who wants to do ballet and the girl who wants to play with toy soldiers or play football. Doesn't matter. People call that gender nonconforming behavior. I just call that individual personalities and what they happen to like. And we should not try and put these kids into giving themselves a label like stellar gender, Mark. Hey, if you're stellar gender, then you align with the stars. I mean, I would just say maybe you're just interested in astronomy, and you might want to look at some of Professor Brian Cox's shows. You don't need to be labeled, and that upsets me terribly. And the other part of this, Mark, is telling children they can change sex. Not only can they choose a ridiculous gender label when they should just celebrate their uniqueness, as every child is unique, they can also change sex, and that is deeply disturbing.
Yeah, and talk about that. We have Maggie Chapman from the Greens in Scotland, and she's done an interview. She's done a few interviews, and she's of the belief that kids as young as 8 years old should be allowed, without parents' consent, without any kind of parents getting involved, to be able to change their sex. That's dangerous, isn't it?
It's appalling. It's dangerous. It's destructive to a child's well-being. Children question all the time about who they are. I want to be a unicorn one day and I want to be a pirate or a princess the next day. Doesn't mean they actually want to become those. And I think her views are extremely dangerous. And they are what have been embraced by so many people who think, oh, we have to be kind. It's not being kind to confuse a young child who is already confused. I mean, think about this, Mark.
Brainwashing, isn't it? It's a kind of brainwashing in schools if they're getting taught this and they're continuously getting told this, and they don't discuss it with the parents either.
Which is,
you don't have to discuss it with your parents. You don't have to talk to your parents about this. And kids normally don't want to talk to the parents about these kind of things anyway. So they're getting brainwashed, aren't they?
Yeah, and they get some creepy teacher who believes in all this, who whispers in that little girl's ear, like my middle granddaughter who loves footy, may end up as a lioness one day. You never know. And whispers, are you maybe a little boy? You like football so much and you're always jumping around the playground and that terrifies me.
Yeah.
Which is why I really want gender identity out of schools, because all these children, and let's look at the CAS review. So Mark, I'm sure you've heard of the CAS review, and that came out in 2022, and it was a review of the gender identity, development clinic at the Tavistock. And the shocking revelations that came out of it, of all the children. So a decade ago, before the report, they'd had 250 children present to the clinic, questioning their gender or their sex. In 2022, they had 5,000. So that's how pernicious this ideology is. And of those 5,000, 75% had 5 or more comorbidities. So they maybe had been bullied. They maybe had sexual abuse as a child. They'd maybe had trauma as a child, mental health disorders, eating disorders. And instead of
Autistic as well, isn't it? That's a big link, isn't it? Autism
and neurodiversity, they might have been been on the autism spectrum, range. So all these children who might have felt uncomfortable for their bodies, which a lot of children feel uncomfortable in their bodies, especially when they're growing, were just told, well, maybe being in a new body, being your brain's in the wrong body, might be the choice for you. Well, that's wrong. Of course, children with neurodiversity, there in my extended family, there are 2 children who are on the spectrum. And yes, they often feel very, quite isolated, don't understand a lot of the things going on in their classroom. And so when you tell them, well, maybe you feel different because actually you're a boy and you're talking to a girl, then they kind of go, oh, maybe I'd feel better if I was a boy, then I would feel like I fit in. That is just shocking. You need to support children with any challenge they're facing and help them be the best they can be.
Yeah. What do you make of Stonewall and their involvement in schools?
Oh, Stonewall needs to get out. The once great and mighty Stonewall that fought for the LGB, they fought for same-sex attraction. They then got turned around about 2014-15 and first added the T in. And at the time, so I wasn't really posting about this, but at the time I thought, what do people who are transsexual, as we used to say, what do people who are transsexual have to do with same-sex attracted people? I didn't really see why they were adding the T on. I thought, well, I'm neither same-sex attracted or trans. Maybe they feel there's something going on. Then they started adding the rest of the alphabet, and they have diluted totally. They are totally pro-trans ideology. They don't care about young gay, lesbian, bisexual children having the gay transed away. And that is really shocking from what the good work they've done for decades before this change. And they embrace this.
They have a lot of access to schools, don't they?
Oh, they do. And, you pay, and corporations too, and organizations like governmental organizations, you pay to do a course and you get like bronze standard, let's say, and then maybe silver standard, then you get the gold standard. So they get a lot of money by teaching schools, institutions, organizations, government departments, their view that things like we shouldn't use the word women. It's cis woman or trans woman. But if you just say woman, then you might be erasing trans women. I mean, it's absolutely ludicrous.
Because you see now a lot of organizations like the NHS are getting rid of the word woman, aren't they? In their leaflets, in their propaganda that they use, they seem to be either diluting it or getting rid of it altogether. That's shocking, isn't it?
Well, it's appalling. And one thing, funny enough, before even the time I heard about J.K. Rowling being horribly abused on social media about 4.5 years ago, about a couple of years before that, I posted something on Twitter because I'd heard that down in Brighton, the NHS Trust was going to stop saying breastfeeding and call it chest feeding. So anybody, people who declare themselves non-binary, but they are still women, or people who just declare themselves as trans men, but they are still women, who are chest feeding to make them feel better. And I remember putting out a post at the time saying, what? I breastfed my children, and anybody who can breastfeed is a breastfeeder. This is absolutely ludicrous. And funny enough, I didn't get any trolling on that post. I got support on that post. People saying, yeah, let's ridiculous, chest feeder.
It's going to the actual extreme, isn't it? It's going to, right to the actual extreme. And it's in the way I've looked at it, it's sending women's rights back
100%.
for decades and decades, 100 years. It's setting women's rights back, especially the eradication of the word women, or even Mother's Day. There was a big debate on whether it should be called Mother's Day or it should be called Person's Day, or what. There was a lot of ridiculous things going out there about Mother's Day. so we've gone to the actual extreme, and it is, and one of the worst things I think is access to public space, women's public
Private
spaces,
spaces.
like
Yeah. Women's
toilets,
private
things like
spaces, like
that is
changing
that,
rooms and
that
things.
really needs to be looked at very seriously now, doesn't it?
Yeah. And you see, you're a man, and all the men in my family understand this principle. And yet, so many men have been gripped by this, and men are the driving force of this, even more than women. And when you think women, what was it? Was it just after World War I when women finally got the rights to have a female toilet, like at the post office where women had started working during the war? And it was a very hard-won battle to get, because otherwise they had to share this tiny little pokey sort of outhouse with the men. And they were very, intimidated by that. And we think of how women were in, say, the early 1900s. They weren't kind of gung-ho like a lot of women are today. They were much more, passive and going along with things. So they fought, the women who fought for things like their own sex toilets, they would be horrified 100 years later, which is another reason why I got involved with this, Mark, because I like to take my granddaughters swimming on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And, we're taking the first one swimming. I do not want a man in there who says he identifies as a woman dangling his bits in front of my innocent granddaughters' faces. And this has happened in America and Europe and in spas and swimming centers in this country, Canada. It's happened across the board where men just think, I can go in there and I can strut around naked. And it tells me they've got some fetish or other. Either they're exhibitionists, they like to shock women and girls, or they may have pedophilic tendencies. They want to be aroused in the company of little girls changing. All these horrific things. I don't think an innocent man wants to go and dangle his bits in a women's changing room, to be honest.
But this is what I keep trying to get across, because people say, well, not every trans person or not every trans person is going to be abusive to women or want to go in there to assault women or anything like that.
Absolutely.
But the whole point is, it leaves itself open to the ones that do want to do it. It makes it easier for them, for that small section of people, of men who want to abuse women. It just says there's an open goal. We're making it easier for you.
That's 100% true. But I also want to make the point, Mark, that even if a man who's has a nice personality and a kind character, but really believes he's a woman, I don't even want someone like that walking in, showering and changing in front of the little girls, that I take there, and that, friends and other across the country. So even well-meaning men who identify as women and don't get a sexual thrill from it, or don't want to upset people and get excited by that, I still don't want their bits in there.
No. It's saying to.
My.
Are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Just the lighting just fell down. I've got one of those little rings to give a little light.
No problem. We'll carry on.
Yeah.
Well, I'll move on now to the ban on puberty blockers.
Yes.
In England. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, celebration. Now, what we have to, understand is children who've already been referred for puberty blockers will still get them. And they are going to start clinical trials on youngsters of puberty blockers. So there are still children that they are allowing to believe that they are in the wrong body and they want to pause their puberty. So I find that tragic. But the best news is no new children will be put forward for puberty blockers, rightly, because there's all sorts of damage that comes from them. Bone density gets affected, brain growth gets affected, sexual development obviously gets affected, and a number of other really serious side effects of these. So they're not to be taken lightly, and they should not be taken. And nobody, I was hearing one commentator saying no one under 21, and anyway, by that age, he would have gone through puberty, but no one under 21 should ever think about medicalizing, doing a medical transition. And I absolutely agree, because your brain is still developing up into your 20s. And you might change your mind about the distress you feel about your gender a bit later in life. And I think it's really important that we start putting in those age guidelines to stop. There's just been the big outcry, and let alone the good news about the NHS puberty blockers here in England. But you've probably heard of the WPATH files that have just exposed the horror show of doctors in America doing like double mastectomies on 14-year-old girls and penile inversions on 16-year-old boys, and how in an internal video conference was released by a whistleblower. And even the doctors admit that talking to a 14-year-old and telling them, if we do this surgery, you will be fertile. So do you think you want to have a baby in the future? And of course, a 14-year-old goes, ooh, babies, no. And then the doctors, one of them kind of laughed about that response. And another said it's like talking to a blank wall, trying to explain to 14-year-olds and their parents what these surgeries will do. But they went ahead and did them. I just think it's criminal. And I think they'll be facing a big class action one day, certainly in America.
While doing a little bit of research before this interview, I'll just read out, and this kind of, in my book, this sums it up quite well. It's from, I'll take my glasses off for this. It's from a Professor Carl Hennigan, Director of the Centre of Evidence-Based Medicine at Oxford. He says, given the evidence of the label use of drugs in gender treatment, you can put parallels to it as being unregulated live experiments on children. Now, that's from a professor of Oxford who states that. That to me is quite. When I read that, I was quite shocked at that. That's the kind of level that these, and they must be worried about this. They must be worried about unregulated treatment, unregulated medicines being just basically being using kids as trial kid, as a guinea pigs.
Yeah, well, evidently, there's been some changes in America, at least, where surgeons and doctors involved in gender medicine, as they call it, are experiencing more issues getting insurance because of the cases that are coming out of the woodwork, the detransitioners. And we just had this week, detransition day. And the people who are taking some of their doctors to court saying, when I was 14, I really didn't understand medical consent and ethical consent. And so their insurance premiums have started to go up. I read a report a few months ago. So some of these doctors are going to, I hope, start questioning what they've been doing and treating children as guinea pigs. I know what I was like as 14. If someone said to me, do you want a baby? I'd be going, what? No way.
The number of times kids change their mind of what they want to do and what they want to be. I always say it. I always simplify it in my mind as when you're 16, 17, and you go out and you think, and you go out with your mates, and your mates say, "Get a tattoo. Go on, get a tattoo. We're going to get a tattoo." And at 16 or 17, you think, "Yeah, why not? I'll get a tattoo then. Okay, yeah, I'll do that." So you get a tattoo, and then in your 20s or 30s, you look and you think, "Why did I bother? Why did I do that? Why? I wish I hadn't done that." Now you can have them removed. You can have it removed.
They don't change your fertility or anything horrific like that.
These surgeries, and once you've had these the medication that they put in there, there's no going back. There's no saying 20 or 30. Oh, I wish I want to have kids now. There's no going back. You
Well,
can't
there
do.
is in the terms of you can detransition, but you're right. Detransitioners talk about these lifelong issues they now have. So you're right in that sense. You can't go back. You can mentally decide, actually, I am the sex I was born. There was never any, I was a woman or I was a man, and I want to detransition and live as how I was born. But you're right. They talk about these calamitous decisions some of them made, especially in America where there's been so much surgery. I liken it, Mark, I've just thought of one thing. It's like if we said to a 15-year-old anorexic patient, we totally buy into it. You believe you're overweight. We're going to give you liposuction so you can get down to as thin as you want. That is literally the same thing as telling a 15-year-old girl or a 15-year-old boy who think they're in the wrong body and they want to have a double mastectomy or they want to have a penile inversion. It's the same sort of thing. You're playing into these huge delusions with massive consequences. And you would never do it with an anorexic patient, would you? You would never say, yeah, sure, we believe your delusion and we will help you with your delusion. You don't do that.
Yeah, it's quite. I do wonder, and you'll know more about this, a lot more about this than I do. But I do wonder how not just the next generation, but maybe the next generation after that. Well, the next generation, how many mental health issues we're going to have because of this period of what's happening.
Yeah, because it will come just as we're seeing more and more detransitioners and all the problems they're facing, and the regret and the guilt and the shame that they ever believed in this ideology. And
Well,
what worries me, Mark, a really good question, is that right now, children in schools, right now, across the whole UK and so many other Western countries, are being mentally captured by this. And it's really hard once you've indoctrinated a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old into this belief that you can be one of these many genders, you can change sex, sex doesn't matter. It's hard to claw those things back, So we're going to have a whole generation captured in this ideology. So it's going to be a long time coming before things are where they should be.
see, I always think, because when you grow up and when you get older, and things have happened when you were a kid, and like at school about changing your gender and all this, and you go ahead with these kind of operations or these puberty blockers and that. When some may not change their minds, but if you do change your mind and you start thinking, well, no, I shouldn't really have done that, the first people you're going to go to and say, why did you not stop me, is your parents. You'll go to your parents and you'll say, why did you allow that? Why did you not stop me? Why did you not inform? Why did you? And they're going to blame the parents when really the parents have been taken out of this equation because they're losing their rights as parents to be able to act on them children's behalf. So
Well, that's
the
a big, big deal. And right now, there's been this schools guidance that has been put out, and I think it closed sometime this week. It closed, where you could put in your ideas about things like gender ideology and going behind parents' backs. And of course, I wrote in, and I know a lot of people in the gender critical or sex realist, biological realist movement, whatever you want to call it, people call it all sorts of things, wrote in to give their opinion. And I'm hoping to goodness that it will be absolutely taken out, as Gillian Keegan has said, that teachers cannot go behind parents' backs. Now, the one thing she did say was, except in extreme circumstances where the teacher feels it really would put the child in danger, to tell the parents. Mark, if there's such extreme circumstances, that the teacher is so worried about the child being in a home like that, why have they not gone to child services anyway, just about the child's welfare? let alone trying to transition them behind their parents' back.
Isn't it? It's too much open to interpretation of what is an extreme.
Exactly.
You know, it's a get out clause for the teachers to say, well, I thought it was
Absolutely.
an extreme case. The last topic I'd like to discuss is sport. And Steak Starmer has come out and said publicly for the first time, because he refused to say it in the past, that he is in favour of men who believe they're women to be able to enter professional sport, women's professional sport. Now, I'm all for that, because I've played sport all my life, and I'm completely all for that.
Yeah.
But I don't think it goes far enough, because that's professional. That's professional sport. What about kids sport? What about sport with kids? Because we've seen, I don't know if you heard this, but one of the biggest girls' league in the UK, and one parent, a parent of a child, complained because he's a boy and he wanted to play in the girls' league with the girls, and he was told he wasn't able to, and they've now complained, and the FA said they may take action on this.
I know it's shocking. The FA have been captured. They've obviously been stonewalled. Now, the thing about Keir Starmer, it seems like step by step, he's becoming more realistic. Now, I know a lot of people that I interact with on X, formerly known as Twitter, say they don't believe him. Now, one reason why is because people are confused about his children, because evidently one of his children has transitioned. So that was in the press a number of months ago. You know, Keir, why won't you tell us the sexes of your two children? Because evidently in two different radios a number of months apart, you know, I think he said first time I have two boys, and then he talked about a boy and a girl or something, or maybe the reverse. I can't remember the dynamic. I'm sorry, I don't know why it's gone out of my head. But people will not trust him when he can't even tell us the sexes of his children. And I think with a politician like that, he needs to come clean and talk about his own personal dilemma that have influenced the policies that Labour have instated. And when you think about it, a number of Labour politicians have said things like, oh yeah, men can have cervixes, you know, women can have penises, you know, crazy, insane things like that. So Labour need to get their act together, because a lot of women are not going to be voting for them for that very reason.
Yeah,
and I think that's a tragedy.
They've flip-flopped on he's flip-flopped on so many issues that people are starting to say, well, you know, in another month he's going to change his mind again, you know, or you know, and is he saying this because it's an election year, and he's looking at the numbers of people and the concerns of people and thinking, well, I better, you know, backtrack on this, and when he's in power, is he going to change his mind again? And is he going to change his mind because of pressure from the party? Because, as you say, the party in Scotland voted for the GRR bill, you know, bill. So is he going to get pressure again once he's prime minister?
Yeah. And will he ever apologize to Rosie Duffield for the way she's been treated horrifically by the Labour Party? And she's been so courageous. I just despair that they cannot start. What I hope, Mark, with these changes, like perhaps the school guidance coming out quite clearly, where parents are going to say, we do not want teachers going behind our backs, with the NHS and the puberty blocker decision, with the WPATH files that, as I said, were just out like last week. Is he going to start seeing the way the land seems to be shifting? I hope so. And if it's a politically motivated decision, if he makes the right decision, that will be good news. So I'm a little bit more lenient with him, because that is my natural party, the Labour Party, than a lot of women who've hovered between different parties and voted different ways at different times. I'm just hoping they make the right decisions, because it's a tough call. It's a tough call at the next election, but you know.
Well, that's the conclusion of the interview, Pam. After the break, I'll be doing a what we call Ziggy's rant. So I'll be then having a little rant about one of the issues we're facing at the moment. So just before then, I want to thank you for coming on my show.
And I want to say thank you so much, and thank you for letting me show everybody Eva the Bear and the Magic Snowflake.
Go and buy the book. It's available on Amazon or on
Austin Macaulay, the publishers.
Yeah. So I'll thank you for that, and we'll back in 2 seconds, and then I'll be having a Ziggy's rant.
Thank you.
Well, it's time for Ziggy's rant, and today I want to rant about the hate bill that's just come out. So that's coming out live on the 1st of April. Now, I've had concerns about this hate bill for a long, long time, since a couple of years since it was first got through Parliament. It was got through, and then it was sent back to be redone because it was called an awful, awful bill where it destroyed people's freedom of speech. It shut down debate, and it was just a shocking bill. Now, it's going live on the 1st of April, and I just want to read you a couple of quotes from cases of Joanne Cherry and Roddy Dunlop. Joanne Cherry has said she's concerned that the new hate law will be weaponized against women. Now that's from Joanne Cherry. And Roddy, he actually said to me on X, responding to one of my posts, that it still remains capable of being an instrument of oppression. Now that's from 2 top KCs within the UK who are both seriously worried about this hate bill. And if this is going to be a disaster, it's going to be unworkable. I think the police are going to have a hell of a time sorting through people phoning because they were called a name or they were so-called abused on Twitter. We've seen it with India. What's the name, Pam? India Wallaby.
India Willoughby.
Yes, she actually phoned the police on
JK
because JK refused to call her a woman and called her a man. So she phoned the police on JK.
He phoned the police.
And the police came out, but they said there was no crime. They considered there was no crime committed. Now, if that's going to be classed as a crime, because it is in the legislation that by misgendering a person, it can be considered a hate speech. So that, after April the 1st in Scotland, will be I would imagine, be considered a hate crime. And that is going to be unworkable. You're going to have a lot of people getting in trouble, a criminal record for saying that a man is a man. I find it quite absolutely shocking, and it needs binned, and it needs binned soon, because that shuts down, in my opinion, it shuts down people, it shuts down debate, it shuts down freedom of speech. And if we can't say how we feel, then and we're worried, like shows like this and shows on other shows on TV or even BBC or ITV or any kind of shows on the internet or anything like that, if you're too worried about overstepping the mark and saying something that you might not, think, well, is that a hate crime? Then we're going to lose a lot of freedoms in this country, and I just think it needs to be binned, seriously binned. So that's my little rant for today. So again, thank you, Dr. Pam, for joining me today.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed the discussion.
I
And
did.
we'll be back next time. So please look out for my next interview. So goodbye.
Goodbye.